The radio crackled to life as Officer Daniel Reyes pulled into the empty parking lot of Maplewood Elementary. Sunday mornings were usually quiet in their small town, but this call had an edge to it that made his instincts prickle. Dispatch. This is Unit 7. I'm on scene at Maplewood Elementary. Daniel spoke into his radio, stepping out of his patrol car. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of autumn leaves and something that made him pause. Copy. Unit 7, caller. Reported a large dog on school property, possibly aggressive. Handle with caution. Daniel adjusted his utility belt and walked toward the main entrance where he could see a figure waving frantically. As he got closer, he recognized Jerry Martinez, the weekend janitor who'd been working at the school for nearly 2 decades. Officer, thank God you're here, Jerry called out, his voice strained with exhaustion. It's that dog. He won't budge, won't eat, won't take water. Been there since I arrived at 6 this morning, maybe longer. Following Jerry around the side of the building, Daniel found himself face to face with a magnificent German Shepherd. The dog was sitting perfectly still at a basement door, his ears erect, amber eyes focused with laser intensity on something beyond the metal barrier. That's Rex, Jerry explained, wringing his hands. Retired canine from the county lives with Mrs. Henderson on Oak Street. But look at him, he won't move, won't respond, just sits there like he's guarding something. Daniel knelt down slowly, keeping his movements deliberate and non-threatening. He'd worked with canine units before and recognized the signs. This wasn't a lost or confused dog. This was a trained officer at work. Easy, boy, Daniel said softly, extending his hand. Palm up. Rex's nose twitched slightly, acknowledging the officer's presence, but his gaze never left the door. When Daniel reached out to touch the dog's head, Rex let out a low rumbling growl that seemed to vibrate through the ground itself. How long did you say he's been here? Daniel asked, studying the dog's rigid posture. All night. I think maybe longer. Mrs. Henderson called the police around midnight, saying he disappeared from her yard. When I got here this morning to prep the building for tomorrow's classes, there he was, hasn't moved an inch. Daniel stood and examined the basement door more closely. It was solid steel, painted institutional green, with a standard lock that appeared undisturbed, but there was something in the air, mustiness that seemed to seep from around the doorframe, mixed with an odor he couldn't quite identify. Jerry, when's the last time you opened this door? The janitor scratched his graying head. Been at least a month, maybe more, just storage down there, old desks, broken equipment, that sort of thing, nothing worth stealing. Rex suddenly shifted, his ears perking up even more. If that were possible. A low whine escaped his throat, different from the growl, more urgent, more desperate. Daniel felt the hair on his arms stand up as the old building seemed to settle around them, its ancient heating system humming to life with a series of mechanical groans. Jerry, I need you to get me the keys to this door. Sure thing, officer, but I'm telling you there's nothing down there but the keys. Jerry, now something in Daniel's tone must have conveyed the seriousness of the situation, because Jerry hurried away without another word. Daniel remained crouched beside Rex, whose entire body was now trembling, not with fear, but with barely contained energy. It was the same vibration he'd seen in working dogs when they'd detected explosives or drugs. The muffled hum of the old building filled the air around them, but underneath it, Daniel could swear he heard something else, something that made his blood run cold and confirmed what Rex's behavior had been trying to tell him all along. Whatever was behind that door, it was a vase. Jerry's footsteps echoed back toward them, keys jangling in his hand. Daniel placed his palm on Rex's head. This time, the dog didn't growl. Instead, he looked up at the officer with eyes that seemed to say, finally, someone who understands. But understanding was just the beginning. As the key turned in the lock with a metallic click that seemed to echo through the empty schoolyard, Daniel realized they were about to descend into something far darker than a simple storage basement. Rex knew it, Daniel knew it, and somewhere in the shadows below, something or someone was waiting. The door creaked open, releasing a wave of cold, stale air that carried with it the promise of secrets that had been buried too long in the darkness. Rex strained against his makeshift leash, every instinct telling him to charge forward, but Daniel held him back. Whatever was down there had been waiting. It could wait a little longer while they prepared for what they might find. As the morning sun climbed higher over Maplewood Elementary, casting long shadows across the playground, Officer Daniel Reyes took a deep breath and prepared to follow Rex into the basement. Neither of them knew it yet, but they were about to uncover a secret that would shake their small town to its core and prove that sometimes the most loyal hearts beat in the chests of four-legged heroes who never stop protecting those who cannot protect themselves. The basement stairs descended into a pool of darkness that seemed to swallow Daniel's flashlight beam whole. Each step groaned under their weight. The old wooden planks, protesting after years of minimal use. Rex strained against the improvised leash Daniel had fashioned from Jerry's maintenance rope, every muscle in the German Shepherd's body coiled with tension. Easy, boy, Daniel whispered, though his own voice betrayed the anxiety building in his chest. We'll take this slow. The air grew colder with each step, carrying that same musty odor he'd noticed at the door, but now it was stronger, more complex. Beneath the expected sense of dust and damp concrete was something else, something organic that made Daniel's stomach clench. Rex's claws clicked against the concrete floor as they reached the bottom of the stairs. The basement stretched out before them, a maze of shadows punctuated by the pale squares of light filtering through high, grimy windows. Daniel swept his flashlight across the space, revealing exactly what Jerry had described. Stacks of broken desks, towers of outdated textbooks, and rows of unused lockers that had been banished to this underground graveyard. But Rex wasn't interested in the obvious storage. His nose was working overtime, leading Daniel deeper into the basement's recesses. The dog moved with purpose, threading between obstacles with the precision of a professional tracker. "What is it, Rex? What do you smell?" The faint sound of dripping water echoed from somewhere ahead, the steady plip-plop of moisture falling into standing puddles. But underneath that mundane sound, Daniel heard something that made his blood freeze. A soft rhythmic noise that could have been breathing. Rex suddenly stopped, his entire body going rigid. A low growl rumbled from his throat as he focused on a section of the basement that appeared different from the rest. While the other areas were cluttered with discarded school equipment, this corner was conspicuously empty except for a collection of wooden boards that had been haphazardly nailed across what appeared to be a storage room entrance. "That's odd," Daniel muttered, approaching the boarded-up area. The wood looked newer than the rest of the basement's fixtures, and there were fresh scratches in the concrete around the base. Scratches that looked suspiciously like claw marks. Began to pace back and forth in front of the boards, his agitation growing by the second. He whined, then barked, a sharp, commanding sound that Daniel recognized immediately. It was the same bark Rex had used during his active duty days, the bark that meant danger. Identified backup required. Daniel pulled out his radio dispatch. "This is Unit 7. I need backup at Maplewood Elementary basement level. Possible situation in progress. Copy, Unit 7. Can you specify the nature of the situation?" Daniel paused, staring at the boarded-up entrance, while Rex continued his agitated pacing. How could he explain that a retired police dog had led him to what could be a crime scene? Just send backup dispatch and make it priority 1. As he clipped the radio back to his belt, Daniel noticed something else. Fresh tool marks on the boards, as if someone had recently reinforced the barrier. But why would anyone go to such lengths to secure a simple storage room? Rex's barking became more insistent, and he began scratching at the boards with his front paws. The sound of wood splintering filled the air, and Daniel realized the dog was making progress. These boards weren't as secure as they appeared. "Hold on, boy, let me." A sound from behind the boards cut Daniel off mid-sentence. It was soft, barely audible over Rex's continued barking, but unmistakably human. A whisper, or maybe a whimper. Someone was behind those boards. Daniel's training kicked in. He drew his weapon while simultaneously pulling out his flashlight, the beam dancing across the makeshift barrier as his hands shook slightly with adrenaline. Rex had gone silent. Now his ears perked forward, listening into "Officer," Daniel called out. "If someone's back there, respond now." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the steady drip of water and the distant hum of the building's ventilation system. Then, so quiet, Daniel almost missed it, came a response that chilled him to the bone. "Help." The word was barely a breath, spoken by a voice so small and frightened that Daniel's chest tightened with a mixture of horror and determination. Rex winced softly, his tail wagging just once, not in happiness but in the satisfaction of a job well done. He'd found what he'd been looking for. Daniel holstered his weapon and grabbed one of the loose boards, using it as a lever to pry the others away from the entrance. The wood groaned and splintered as he worked, each board revealing more of the darkness beyond. Rex pressed close to Daniel's side, no longer agitated but intensely focused, ready for whatever they might find. As the last board clattered to the floor, Daniel shined his flashlight through the opening they'd created. The beam revealed a narrow doorway leading to what appeared to be another room, a room that shouldn't exist, according to the school's blueprints. "Is someone there?" Daniel called softly. This time the response came quicker, stronger. "Please help, uses plural." Daniel felt his mouth go dry as the full implications of Rex's discovery began to sink in. This wasn't just someone who'd gotten locked in by accident. The boards, the hidden room, the desperate whispers in the dark. This was something planned, something deliberate, something evil. Rex pressed forward, straining to enter the revealed doorway, but Daniel held him back. They needed backup, they needed support. But most importantly, they needed to be careful. If someone was trapped inside that hidden room, they needed to be rescued. But if someone else was responsible for putting them there, that person might still be nearby. His footsteps echoed from the stairway above. Jerry, returning, or perhaps the backup Daniel had called for. Officer Daniel Reyes realized that what had started as a simple animal control call had just become the most important case of his career. Rex had found something in the basement of Maplewood Elementary, something that someone had gone to great lengths to hide. The question now was, what else might they find in the shadows below? The beam of Daniel's flashlight pierced through the doorway Rex had helped reveal, illuminating a narrow corridor that stretched deeper into the basement than the building's blueprints suggested was possible. The walls were rough concrete, sweating with moisture, and the air that drifted toward them carried a metallic tense that made Daniel's stomach churn. "Jerry," Daniel called up the stairs as the janitor's footsteps grew louder. "Stay upstairs and watch for my backup. Don't let anyone else down here." "But officer, just do it." Rex pressed against Daniel's leg, his body vibrating with barely contained energy. The dog's training was evident. In every line of his posture, he wanted to move forward to complete the mission. But he waited for his human partners. Command Daniel took a deep breath and stepped through the opening, his flashlight sweeping left and right as they advanced down. The corridor of the space felt wrong somehow, as if it had been carved out of the earth in secret, away from architectural plans and building. Inspections. After 20 feet, the corridor opened into a larger chamber. Daniel's flashlight beam danced across the walls, revealing something that made his blood run cold. This wasn't just a hidden room, it was a constructed space, complete with ventilation, grates, electrical outlets, and what appeared to be a small table with supplies stacked neatly on its surface. But it was the far wall that drew his attention. A heavy metal door, the kind used in industrial settings, stood slightly ajar. Fresh scratches marred the concrete around its frame, and a heavy padlock hung open from a metal hasp. "Daniel," called out, his voice echoing in the confined space. "Is anyone in there?" The response came immediately, this time, stronger and more desperate. "Here, we're here. Please help." Rex lunged forward, but Daniel caught his collar. They needed to be smart about this. Whoever had built this hidden space had done so with purpose. This wasn't some forgotten storage area. It was constructed, equipped, and secured, which meant whoever was responsible might still be near. But Daniel approached the metal door slowly, his weapon drawn but pointed downward. Rex stayed close to his side, no longer pulling but moving with the controlled precision of a working dog. As they reached the door, Daniel could hear movement from within, shuffling sounds, whispered voices, the unmistakable sound of human presence. "I'm Officer Reyes with the police," Daniel called through the gap in the door. "How many of you are in there?" "Two," came a young voice, clearly a child. "We're just kids. Please get us out." Daniel's chest tightened. Children. Rex had led him to children who'd been locked in an underground chamber beneath an elementary school. The full horror of what they'd discovered began to crystallize in his mind. Using his flashlight to illuminate the door mechanism, Daniel could see that while the padlock was open, there were other security measures in place: the slide bolts and what appeared to be a timer mechanism that had recently been disabled. This wasn't just imprisonment. It was systematic, planned, professional. "I'm going to open the door," Daniel called out. Step back from the entrance. He holstered his weapon and grasped the heavy door handle. The metal was cold under his palm, and the door moved with surprising ease, despite its weight. As it swung open, the smell that had been lurking beneath the mustiness of the basement hit them. Full force and washed bodies, fear, and the distinctive odor of a space where people had been confined to long. Rex wind softly as Daniel's flashlight beam revealed the interior of the chamber. Two children, a boy and a girl who appeared to be around 8 or 9 years old, huddled together in the far corner. They were dirty, their clothes wrinkled, and stained, their eyes wide with a mixture of terror and desperate. "Hope it's okay," Daniel said gently, kneeling down to their level while keeping his flashlight pointed toward the floor to avoid blinding them. "You're safe now. I'm a police officer, and this is Rex. We're here to help you." Children didn't move toward them immediately. Instead, they pressed closer together, studying Daniel's face in the dim light. It was the girl who spoke first, her voice hoarse but determined. "Are you really police?" The man said police wouldn't come. He said no one would look for us because no one reported us missing. Daniel felt ice form in his veins. "What man? What man?" The boy answered, his voice barely above a whisper. "The one who brought us here. He smelled like oil and old smoke. He said he was going to keep us until it was time. Time for what?" But before either child could answer, Rex's head snapped toward the entrance they'd come through. His ears were erect, his body tense with alarm. A low growl rumbled from his throat, not the warning growl from earlier, but something deeper, more threatening. Daniel immediately understood. Rex had detected something, someone their position. "Listen to me carefully," Daniel whispered to the children, his training taking over. "I need you both to stay here, stay quiet, and don't come out until I call for you. Can you do that?" Both children nodded, their eyes reflecting their understanding of the gravity of the situation. They'd survived whatever ordeal had brought them to this place by being smart and following instructions. Daniel stood and moved back toward the chamber entrance, Rex at his side. The dog's body language told him everything he needed to know. They weren't alone in the basement anymore. From somewhere in the darkness beyond the hidden corridor came the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, careful. Someone was moving through the basement, and they were trying not to be hurt. Daniel drew his weapon and clicked off his flashlight, plunging them into near total darkness. Rex pressed against his leg, a warm, reassuring presence in the blackness. They waited, listening to the footsteps grow closer. The sound stopped just outside the corridor entrance. In the silence that followed, Daniel could hear his own heartbeat and the quiet breathing of the children behind him. Rex remained perfectly still, but Daniel could feel the tension in the dog's muscles, coiled and ready for action. A voice drifted through the darkness, casual and conversational, as if its owner were commenting on the weather. "I know you're down there, officer, and I know you found my collection." Daniel's grip tightened on his weapon. Collection, the word sent a chill down his spine as he realized the full scope of what they'd stumbled into. The voice continued, closer now. "You really should have minded your own business, and you definitely should have left that damn dog at home, in the darkness behind." him. Daniel heard one of the children whimper softly. Rex's growl grew deeper, more menacing. And somewhere in the basement, above them, heavy footsteps began to move again, not toward the exit this time, but circling around looking for another way. The hunter had become the hunted, and the basement of Maplewood Elementary had just become a battleground. Children's terrified whispers cut through the darkness behind Daniel as Rex's low growl intensified in the confined space of the hidden chamber. Every sound seemed amplified. Their breathing, the drip of water from somewhere overhead, and most unnervingly, the deliberate footsteps circling through the basement above Mr. Policeman. The little girl whispered, her voice barely audible. "He's coming back. He always comes back." Daniel remained crouched at the entrance to the chamber, his weapon trained on the corridor they'd used to enter. Rex pressed against his left side, the dog's entire body coiled with tension. The German Shepherd's head moved slightly, tracking sounds Daniel couldn't yet hear. "How long have you been down here?" Daniel whispered back to the children. 3 days, the boy replied, his voice cracking. Maybe, for it's hard to tell without windows. 3 days. Daniel's mind raced. 3 days, and no missing person reports had crossed his desk. How was that possible? "Unless, what are your names?" Daniel asked. Softly, Emma, the girl said. "This is Tyler, but we're not from here. We were visiting our aunt in Springfield when..." Her voice broke off in a sob. Springfield, 2 hours away. That would explain why no local reports had been filed. But it also meant this wasn't random. Someone had specifically targeted these children from out of town, knowing they wouldn't be immediately missed in the local community above them. The footsteps stopped. The silence stretched for long seconds before a new sound filled the air. The distant groan of metal on metal. Someone was opening another basement. Rex's ears perked up, and he turned his head to a section of wall Daniel hadn't noticed before. In the darkness, it looked like solid concrete, but as his eyes adjusted, he could make out the faint outline of what might be another entrance. "There's another way in," Daniel realized. With growing dread, the footsteps resumed closer now, moving with purpose through what sounded like a parallel corridor. Whoever was stalking them knew this hidden network of passages intimately. They'd built it, planned it, prepared for exactly this kind of situation. "Watch, officer," the voice called out again, echoing from multiple directions. "Now I'm impressed. You found my little sanctuary. Took the county K-9 unit to manage it though, didn't it? I always wondered if Rex was as good as his reputation." Man knew Rex by name. Daniel felt his stomach drop as the implications sank in. This wasn't just some random redditor. This was someone connected to law enforcement, someone who'd been watching, planning, someone who knew exactly which dog would be capable of tracking down his hidden chamber. Jerry, Daniel whispered to himself, the pieces clicking into place. The janitor with access to the building, who smelled of oil and old smoke, who'd been working at the school for 20 years, who'd known exactly where Rex was sitting, and for how long. But even as the thought formed, Daniel heard Jerry's voice from upstairs calling down, "Officer Reyes, your backup's here." If Jerry was upstairs, then who? The question was answered by a new voice, different from the one that had been taunting them. This voice was familiar, one Daniel had heard countless times over his radio. During late-night shifts. "Danny boy, you always were too curious for your own good, detective." Mike Harrison, Daniel's supervisor, his mentor, the man who'd recommended him for the K-9 unit, the man who would have known Rex's capabilities better than anyone. Rex's growl shifted to something Daniel had never heard from the dog before. Sound of pure focused hatred. The German Shepherd had recognized the voice too. "Mike," Daniel called out, his voice echoing in the chamber. "Mike, what the hell is going on?" Footsteps approached from what sounded like directly above them. When Harrison spoke again, his voice carried the casual tone of someone explaining a mildly interesting hobby. "You know, Danny, I've been using this place for almost 5 years now. Built it myself during the school renovation project. Amazing what you can accomplish when you have a badge and people trust you. The hidden door in the wall that Rex had been watching suddenly swung open, spilling artificial light into their chamber. Daniel spun toward it, his weapon raised, but the opening remained empty. "Put the gun down, Danny. You're outnumbered, outflanked, and frankly, you're in over your head." Daniel's mind raced through his options. The children behind him, Rex at his side, an unknown number of exits and entrances, and a corrupt cop who'd been operating under everyone's noses for years. "The children go free," Daniel called out. "Whatever this is about, they're innocent." Harrison's laughter echoed from the darkness. "Innocent? Danny, these kids have seen everything. They know exactly what this place is for. You think I can just let them walk away?" Emma whimpered. Behind Daniel, and Tyler's voice cracked as he whispered, "He showed us the pictures, Mr. Policeman. Pictures of other kids who tried to leave. Daniel's blood turned to ice. Pictures, other kids." This wasn't Harrison's first time, wasn't his only location. This was a network, an operation that had been running for years. Right under the nose of the department, Rex suddenly shifted his attention, focused on yet another section of the chamber. His nose was working overtime, and Daniel realized the dog was tracking multiple scents, not just Harrison, but others. They weren't alone down here, and Harrison wasn't working alone. "Rex knows, doesn't he?" Harrison's voice came from a different direction now. That's why I could never use him on my operations. Too well trained, too loyal, too damn good at his job. The lights overhead suddenly blazed to life, momentarily blinding Daniel. As his eyes adjusted, he found himself looking at a chamber far more sophisticated than he'd initially realized. Multiple entrances, surveillance equipment, and something that made his stomach lurch. Charts and photographs covering one wall documenting what could only be described as a hunting record. And standing in the newest doorway, silhouetted against the harsh light, was Detective Mike Harrison, no longer bothering to hide behind the darkness. "Hello," Danny Harrison said, his service weapon drawn but pointed casually downward. "Looks like you and Rex just graduated from animal control to the major leagues." Behind Daniel, the children pressed closer together. Rex's body was vibrating with barely contained rage, every instinct telling him to attack, but still waiting for Daniel's command. The basement had revealed its secrets, but the worst secret of all was that the monster they'd uncovered wore a badge and had been hiding in plain sight for years. The question now wasn't just how to escape. It was how many other children Harrison had taken, and whether any of them were still alive to be saved. As the harsh lights cast stark shadows across the chamber, Daniel realized that Rex hadn't just led him to a rescue operation. He'd led him to the heart of a conspiracy that reached into the very institution Daniel had sworn to serve. The harsh fluorescent lights cast everything in stark, unforgiving detail. Daniel could see Harrison clearly. Now his supervisor looked remarkably calm, for someone whose secret operation had just been exposed. To calm, which meant he had a plan. "You know, Danny," Harrison said, conversationally, his weapon still pointed downward, "I always liked you. Good instincts, solid work ethic, never asked too many questions. It's really a shame it had to end this way." Rex's muscles were coiled springs under Daniel's hand. The dog's training was absolute. He wouldn't attack without a command, but Daniel could feel how desperately Rex wanted to act. This was personal for the German Shepherd. How many times had Harrison used his position to undermine canine investigations? How many trails had gone cold because the person directing the search already knew where not to look? "Let the children go, Mike," Daniel said, keeping his voice steady. "This is between us." Now Harrison laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Is it though? See, that's where you're wrong. This was never just between us." He raised his voice slightly. "Tommy, Carl, time to join the party." Two more figures emerged from concealed doorways. Daniel hadn't even noticed Tommy Chen from Dispatch, a man who would have known about every canine deployment, every search and rescue operation, and Carl Williams, a patrol officer Daniel had worked with dozens of times. "Jesus," Daniel whispered, "how many of you are there?" "Enough," Harrison replied. "You think something like this runs itself? You think I built all this?" He gestured at the sophisticated chamber around them. "Without help, without inside information, without people in the right places to make sure investigations went nowhere." The scope of it hit Daniel like a physical blow. This wasn't just Harrison gone rogue. This was a network operating within the police department itself, using their badges and their access to hunt children. Amos' voice, small and terrified, cut through Daniel's racing thoughts. "There are more kids in the other rooms. He keeps them separated so they can't plan together." Rooms. Daniel's eyes swept the chamber again, noticing details he'd missed in his initial shock. What he'd taken for storage alcoves were actually doorways, most of them sealed with the same heavy metal doors. How many children were down here? How long had this been going on? "Emma, sweetheart," Daniel said softly, never taking his eyes off Harrison. "How many other kids have you seen?" "6, Tyler answered before Emma could speak. 6 others, but some of them stopped answering when we called to them." Daniel felt something die inside his chest. 6 more children, possibly more, some who had stopped answering. Rex suddenly shifted his attention, snapping to one of the sealed doorways. His tail gave a single sharp wag, the signal Daniel recognized from Rex's active duty days life. "Detective, they're alive," Daniel whispered, understanding immediately some of them are still alive. Harrison noticed the exchange and shook his head sadly. "That dog really is too good for his own good." "Yes, Danny, some of them are still alive for now. But that depends entirely on what happens in the next few minutes." "You son of a bitch," Daniel snarled, his grip tightening on his weapon. "Careful, Danny, you're outnumbered 3 to 1, and you've got civilians to protect. Even if you could take all of us, which you can't, one stray bullet could hit those kids you're trying to save." Harrison was right, and they both knew it. Daniel was trapped, outgunned, and responsible for not just Emma and Tyler, but potentially 6 other children imprisoned in this underground nightmare. But Harrison had made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated Rex. The German Shepherd had spent years learning to read human behavior, to detect threats, to respond to crisis situations, and right now Rex was reading the room with the precision of a tactical computer. 3 men with weapons, multiple exits, innocents to protect, and a handler who needed support. Rex made his decision. The dog exploded into motion without warning, launching himself not at Harrison, the obvious threat, but at Tommy Chen, who'd been moving to flank Daniel's position. Rex's training kicked in perfectly. Disabled the threat control, the weapon maintained the advantage. Tommy went down hard, his weapon skittering across the concrete floor as Rex's weight and momentum drove him into the chamber wall. The impact echoed through the space like a gunshot. Daniel didn't waste the opportunity. He pivoted toward Harrison, but Carl Williams was already moving, raising his weapon toward the children. Daniel's shot took Williams center mass, dropping him. Instantly Harrison dove for cover behind one of the metal doors, returning fire as Daniel grabbed Emma and Tyler, pushing them toward the corridor entrance. Daniel shouted to the children, "Straight back the way we came. Up the stairs, find the other officers." Emma and Tyler hesitated for a split second, then sprinted toward the corridor, as Daniel provided. Covering fire, Rex had neutralized Tommy Chin, and was now advancing on Harrison's position using the maze of equipment and doorways for cover. "You can't win this, Danny," Harrison called out from behind his barrier. "Even if you get out, even if you expose all this, how many more like us are out there? How many other operations are running right now?" Daniel didn't answer. He was too busy checking the sealed doorways, looking for the other children. Rex had detected the first door he tried was locked, but he could hear movement behind it. The second opened to reveal two more children, a boy and girl slightly older than Emma and Tyler. "Police," Daniel said quickly. "I'm here to get you out. Can you walk?" Both children nodded, too shocked to speak, but mobile enough to move. Daniel guided them toward the corridor entrance, where he could hear backup finally arriving. Real backup this time, officers who weren't part of Harrison's network. Rex had cornered Harrison behind one of the larger pieces of equipment, but the corrupt detective still had his weapon and was clearly desperate. Desperate men made poor decisions, and poor decisions in a room full of children could be catastrophic. "Mike," Daniel called out, "it's over. The whole operation is blown. Surrender now, and maybe you can cut a deal." "Deal?" Harrison's laugh was bitter. "You think this ends with me? You think I'm the top of this food chain? Danny, you have no idea how deep this goes." But even as Harrison spoke, Daniel heard something that filled him with hope. The sound of children's voices from the other sealed rooms calling out in response to the commotion. They were alive. Rex had been right. There were survivors, and now they had a chance to be saved. The final confrontation came quickly. Harrison made a desperate break for one of the exit tunnels, but Rex was waiting. The German Shepherd's training and instincts combined in a perfect tactical response. He herded Harrison back into the chamber where Daniel was ready. With backup officers flooding through the entrances, the dust settled, and Harrison was taken into custody. Daniel knelt beside Rex, running his hands through the dog's fur. The German Shepherd's tail wagged once, then he walked over to one of the sealed doors and sat down, looking expectantly at Daniel. Daniel Astrex barked once. Yes. Over the next hour, they found 9 children total. 9 children who'd been reported missing from towns within a 3-hour radius, taken by a network of corrupt officers who'd used their badges to hunt rather than protect. As the children were led upstairs to safety and medical attention, Rex remained at Daniel's side. The old German Shepherd looked tired, now his adrenaline fading, but there was something in his eyes that Daniel recognized. Satisfaction. The job was done, but, as Harrison had warned, this was bigger than just 3 corrupt cops in a small town. In the weeks that followed, the investigation would reveal connections to other departments, other operations, a network of predators that stretched across state lines, and, through it all, Rex would be there, his nose and instincts, helping investigators track down every lead, find every hidden location, rescue every child who could still be saved. The dog that had refused to leave Maplewood Elementary's basement door had done more than save 9 children. He'd exposed a conspiracy that had been operating in the shadows for years, protected by the very people who were supposed to stand against such evil. As Daniel walked Rex out of the basement and into the morning sunlight, where news crews and federal agents were already arriving, he realized something profound. Rex hadn't been a retired K-9 sitting at that door. He'd been a police officer, still on duty, still protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. Some heroes wear badges, others wear fur, and answer to simple names like Rex, but all of them share one common trait: they never stop serving, never stop protecting, never stop fighting for those who need them most. The basement at Maplewood Elementary would be sealed and forgotten, but the children who'd been rescued would remember. And somewhere in the town of Maplewood, an old German Shepherd named Rex would sleep peacefully, knowing that his most important case was finally closed. 3 months later, Daniel would visit Rex at Mrs. Henderson's house, bringing a special commendation from the FBI task force that had dismantled the wider network. The corruption had run deeper than anyone imagined. 17 officers across 4 states, dozens of children rescued, and countless more saved by the exposure of the operation. Rex accepted the ceremony with the dignity of a veteran, his amber eyes bright with intelligence as Daniel pinned the medal to his collar. But what the German Shepherd seemed to appreciate most wasn't the recognition. It was the simple fact that the children were safe, the monsters were caged, and justice had finally been served. Daniel prepared to leave that day. Rex walked with him to the gate, just as he had on countless patrol shifts years before. The dog's muzzle was grayer now, his steps a little slower, but his spirit remained unbroken. He'd proven that heroism doesn't retire, it simply finds new ways to serve. Mrs. Henderson called out from her porch. "He still sits by that basement door. Sometimes, you know, Just checking, making sure, Daniel smiled, scratching Rex behind the ears. One last time, once a cop, always a cop, he murmured. Rex barked once in agreement, then trotted back toward the house, his duty done, but his vigilance eternal. In a world where monsters could hide behind badges and evil could masquerade as authority, there was comfort in knowing that some guardians, whether they walked on 2 legs or 4, would never stop standing. Watch. The case was closed, but the bond between a good cop and his 4-legged partner would endure forever. And in the basement of Maplewood Elementary, where darkness had once hidden unspeakable horrors, only empty rooms remained, a testament to the power of loyalty, courage, and the unwavering determination to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Rex had done more than solve a case. He'd reminded everyone that heroism comes in many forms, and sometimes the most important heroes are the ones who refuse to give up even when everyone else has walked away. This story explores themes of corruption, heroism, and the unbreakable bond between law enforcement officers and their canine partners. While fictional, it pays tribute to the countless police dogs who have served with honor and the officers who work tirelessly to protect children from harm.